Thanks, John. So, transforming systems into knowledge. I'll talk about some of that, but bear with me while I sometimes go off on a few tangents as I do that. I thought I'd start by giving a little bit of background. John's already mentioned that sort of something about the Birmingham story, but what I'd like to talk about is Birmingham's transformation programme, which I came in to lead in 2003. Was really the first major corporately led, IT enabled or information enabled transformation programme in the UK. It was very, very large investment, very large returns. Then, drawing out from that, the sort of role of information and knowledge in the management of transformation, sorry, role of information and knowledge management in transformation. What allows us to do that sort of transformational activity. But then reflected on that journey to date, thinking about whether now we actually need a more radical approach. Of course, some of that is informed by the situation in the UK. If you think you've got austerity measures in Australia, you ain't seen nothing yet. Last year, local government budgets were cut by 15%, and there's another 15% over the course of the next 2 years. So 30% cuts within 3 years. So a very significant downsizing is happening at the moment. So talk about 45,000 employees, that's probably a little out of date. It's probably more like 38 now. And I have to confess, I'm one of those who's exited. My last day's employment with Birmingham City Council was the 30th of June. So I've taken the Queen's shilling and now setting up as an independent. So I can say what I like. And so what do we do as a unitary council? I could probably spend the next 50 minutes talking about the structure of local government in the UK, because it's horribly complex. It's highly political. One of the earlier speakers talked about the very low membership of political parties these days. Actually, that is driving the structure of local government in the UK. So we have a lot of very small councils in two-tier areas who politically it's impossible to amalgamate, because that is where the more senior politicians get the people who go and knock on doors at election time. So there's a real challenge around understanding that dynamic. So we have councils that will never actually have the capacity to transform because they're too small. Birmingham isn't like that. Birmingham is very large. We as a unitary council, we deliver social care is by far our biggest service. It's about a third of our workforce, delivers adult and child social care. Education in the UK has been pretty well devolved down to school level, but we do policy and planning. We have something like 70,000 housing units, which is probably about half the social housing units within the city, but there are housing associations as well. We do some welfare benefits, but that's changing again at the moment. Development control, regeneration. Property tax collection, interestingly, we have another fundamental challenge within urban areas in the UK in that the taxation mandate that the politicians have only raises something like 25% of our spend. 75% of our income comes from government grant, which means two things. It means central government has a heavy influence on what we do without needing to legislate, because they can just cut the budget. And secondly, it means if they do cut the budget, the gearing is significant. So if government cuts their grant by 1%, we have to increase our taxation by 3% to compensate. So that gives not a very good political situation, and one which has been highly politicised in Birmingham itself as we try and get more control over local public spending. Won't go through all the rest. There are some peculiarities in there though. So lots of these services are actually discretionary. We don't have to provide them. But lots of services which are discretionary are valued by the political chattering classes. So the people who are prepared to come out and say what they feel, things like library services. We have libraries which are very underused, but very highly valued by the middle class population in that area. So actually cutting those is politically incredibly difficult. So a few statistics. We have a very proud history. We were the cradle of the Industrial Revolution. I don't think historically there's any real doubt about that. Iron Bridge, which, believe it or not, was where the first iron bridge was built, is just down the road from Birmingham. Why did Birmingham happen to grow up there? It was on the border of three of the historic counties of England, and was not controlled by the medieval guilds. So you could start industry there without actually having the problems of the way the guilds used to operate in terms of monopoly around services. That's why Birmingham grew up at the end of middle to end of the 18th century. From a council point of view, we're also very proud that we are really the first modern sort of city council in the world. So we were the first council to bring in street lighting. We're the first council to bring in clean water for all our population. We're the first council to do slum clearance. We didn't really consult about it, we just went in and knocked down the houses, but it worked. And we have a big, my original job was sort of head of IT, and I gradually morphed into the leader of business change within the council. And IT service, to give you some idea of the scale, 500 IT staff, 1,000 buildings on our wide area network. So it's, you know, for the techies amongst the people I used to manage, it was a great place to work. You know, you were really doing probably one of the biggest public sector wide area networks in the country, albeit geographically quite limited. So these are some statistics. I won't dwell on these, but apart from one, we still own something like 40% of the land in the city is owned by the city council. Why that is important is because when we did our transformation programme, we actually funded our transformation programme by borrowing against that asset. So it didn't, one of the beauties of that is it didn't impact at all on the council's own capital programme. So we could actually, if you like, ring fence our transformation budget. I recognise that that is probably unique in a UK context, but it actually allowed us to do a lot of investment, which otherwise we would have struggled with. So, where we started back in 2003, this was rewinding the clock. Tony Blair was Prime Minister. We had something called Comprehensive Performance Assessment, where central government judged how well local government was delivering services. And you could be judged on 1 to 4 star, and whether or not you were likely to improve. As you can see, we weren't doing very well. We could have only gone down 1 star further down the pecking order. And I think when I joined, I think probably it'd be fair to say the council was mainly in denial about that. There was a view that we weren't providing bad services, but the inspection regime was fundamentally flawed. So we weren't being properly inspected. If only they'd look under the surface, it'd be fine. And I think the challenge around that was there were actually some really, really good services. So we were very, very good at regeneration, still are. So there was always something that a politician or a senior manager could point to and say, actually, we're really good, look over there. But in reality, most of our services were not very good. We were beginning to grapple with the demographics, increasingly ageing population, which was predictions back in 2003 were that if we did nothing by 2026, the entire council budget would be consumed by social care. So not something that was actually viable in the long term. So we had to get more efficient. We then changed administration. After the best part of 20 years of Labour ruling, we got a Conservative Lib Dem coalition in June 2004, and that was very strongly focused on we will keep council tax below inflation, which again drove significant needs for efficiency. Central government at the time had a mantra about transformation. It's been morphed by the new government, the Cameron government, into talking about efficiency and reform. There isn't a great deal between those two. They more or less mean the same thing. But we're also being encouraged to join up services across public sector providers. We have this concept of total place, where we'd look at an area, a community, and say, let's put all the money the public spends in that community into a pot and then put it all together so we deliver joined up services. And that again has been kept going by the new government into something called place-based budgeting. We have, as you will have, the problem that customer expectations are rising, so we're trying to make efficiency savings at the same time as being expected to improve services, and we're under pressure to join up and share data. So we have real issues in the UK. We provide social care, the National Health Service provides primary health care, and we have all sorts of interesting issues about putting, in effect, shunting the high cost people from one to the other, because none of us really want them. We're not allowed to say that in public, but actually we'd much rather some of our elderly people stayed in hospital longer, because they don't cost us a penny when they're in hospital. They cost us a lot of money when they're back in the community and we're supporting them. Ditto, the National Health Services doesn't like people in the beds who don't require that medical care. So a lot of moving. So it is really shuffling deck chairs on the sort of public sector Titanic. So we started in 2003 and we set a vision for what we wanted to achieve. And we sat down with our senior management team and our politicians and said we want to achieve three things really. First of all, we wanted to improve our services, and one of the things that we built into this process is everything we do has to be measurable. Certainly at an official level, it's very difficult actually to get politicians to accept that things should be measured, and I do recognise that because it's much easier politically to talk about getting better than to say about how much you're going to get better, because there's always a chance you won't quite make it. But we, at the sort of senior management team level, said we need to put some measures, so we wanted to move to top decile performance, top 10%. Sitting alongside that, we wanted to get greater efficiency, and again, we set a measure of 15% productivity improvement. We also said we wanted the people to have better jobs who work for the council. Though we're always very upfront, we're a service-based organisation. If you're getting 15% productivity gain, you're going to be running down headcount. We thought we could do it at the time, just through natural turnover, and we more or less managed that. We didn't quite do it because we then got blown off course by 2008 and afterwards. Of course, we needed to get all that working seamlessly together if we were actually going to transform the organisation. So what has been done in Birmingham? I think some really good stuff. We set up 9 programmes of change, and it took us about, really started doing things for real about 2006. We recognised that we needed a private sector partner to help us do this, so we spent about 2 years procuring that partner and didn't do a great deal of change. We talked about it, but didn't do a great deal. So it wasn't until 2006 we actually started doing things on the ground. And these were the 9 programmes we set up. I'll talk briefly about each of them. So corporate services transformation was looking at the finance, procurement, project and programme management functions, the back office, or significant aspects of the back office, and moving towards a shared service centre for the council. So looking at a single approach to doing transactional processing within the council. Moving the input of those transactions to the people who actually were undertaking those transactions. So instead of filling in bits of paper that then floated around the organisation, you actually did it on a PC, you going straight to sort of Amazon style page. And ensuring greater compliance with that by being able to track non-compliance. Working for the future, reducing our office space, so we've got something like 12,000 of our people working what we call central administrative people. That they aren't all involved in admin. It would include, for example, people like social workers. So these are people who have an office space. We occupied in 2006 something like 55 buildings or parts of buildings spread across the city. We've reduced that to 8, including a brand new build, and brought in open plan offices, agile working, flexible working, people whose role allows them to, are encouraged to work from home when it's appropriate to do so, and we've reduced our floor footprint by over 30%. So looking at a huge measure of efficiency saving through that route. Excellence in people management, dealing with the HR side of things, trying to move towards a improved performance and a consistent approach to performance right across the council. And I'll show some examples of that later on. Excellence in information management, really looking at how we treat information as a corporate resource and manage it as a single resource within the organisation. So we have now a corporate information management team. We have a single approach to electronic document management. We have a single GIS system, which for an organisation when I joined which had 27 GIS systems is good going, I think. Customer First is probably one of our more radical programmes. Again, I'll talk about this later, but it is joining up all the services around the council, so that the customer has one view of what we do. Incredibly convoluted, and one of the things I don't think we don't take into account enough is that government is complex, and it's either complex for the citizen to have to navigate, or that complexity is built into the organisation. So you build the complexity into your own operational processes. You can't have it both ways. We can't make government simple unless we stop doing some of our 140 range of services. So one of the things we need to think about is how we manage complexity in the public sector. Sorry, I should have said the colour coding does mean things, but the bottom 5 are actually ones which cut across departmental boundaries. So they were the really small p, politically challenging internally, where we were, Customer First was taking staff off departments, creating a customer service department from scratch. That didn't necessarily go down well with the people who were managing those people. The top ones were based in existing departments, so somewhat easier. So children, young people and families, looking at how we managed the child social care, which is really about child protection, a lot of it. How do we stop children being abused? I'm trying to move from a reactive model where we get involved when say a teacher rings us up, to a preventative model where you engage with that family a decade earlier in the process with things like parenting skills. So you need information again to be able to target those families, identify and target those families. Adults, moving away from a vanilla approach to providing adult social care, where if you need, for example, social contact as an elderly person, we used to take you down to a daycare centre once or twice a week, and you get a minibus turn up outside your house, we'd load you on the minibus, we'd take you down, you'd sit in a circle and you'd sing songs together. Which might work for some people, but actually putting the responsibility back to the older person to choose the sort of socialisation they want by giving them the budget rather than giving them the service. So if you want to go down to bingo and meet people of a younger generation than you, because that's what gives you, then discuss it with your social worker. If that's seen as appropriate, you can use the budget to fund that. Housing, I've talked about our 70,000 housing units, so this was a way to improve them. They were pretty poor, not particularly transformational in all honesty. It was turning a pretty dire housing service into a good housing service. So I think from the tenant's point of view it was transformational, but it wasn't actually doing anything fundamentally different. And finally, one that was started off as a focus on providing a green city, but became very strongly focused on the state's sustainability agenda. So that's what we were doing, and we spent a lot of money on it. As you can see, we invested a significant sum. Just to give you some idea, just going back to the earlier slide, our sort of revenue budget is round about 4.5 billion Australian dollars. So that's trying to put some context around that. But we were investing heavily in this. But it is reaping the rewards. We are getting the efficiency savings, and we are getting the better services. And we are actually tracking both of those through the process, so we know we're getting better services. So, sometimes I would argue, I think it's a sort of technology-enabled program. Actually, in reality, it's an information-enabled change program. So it's how we are using information, which the technology supports, of course, which is allowing us to drive that change. So let's take some examples of that. First of all, providing the council with information on the customer. So with our new website, we do a lot of analytics around what people are looking at. As you can see, the most important thing for most people is jobs. This is really interesting because if you talk to most of our service heads, what they're really interested in is their own particular service on the website. Actually, there isn't a huge amount of looking at services. It's a sort of that bottom right-hand quadrant is all the service-based stuff. The rest is about events, particularly seasonal events. This is particularly true of parents who get sort of 2 days into the school holiday and think, what the hell do I do with them now? And there's suddenly a huge peak in looking for people trying to find things to take the children to. We've moved very strongly towards a GIS approach for providing information to our citizens. So we've got sort of this Where's My Local, and gradually adding service after service onto that. So you find your local school, find your local recycling point, etc., etc. But we've also done a lot of work in customer knowledge. So trying to, first of all, segment our customers into groups. So we've got looking at people who've got similar needs, build customer knowledge around those groups, and then from that develop a customer strategy, and then start doing proactive communication, targeted communication with those groups. So instead of sending out something to everybody, we'll identify groups that we can target. So a really good example of that is people on benefit are entitled to use our leisure centres for free. Lots of people on benefit lead relatively unhealthy lives, so getting them into the leisure centres is actually good for them and good for the taxpayer at the end of the day. So you find you can segment your people into people who, so you can target people who are on benefit, who are not members of the leisure centre, and then send them information to try and get them to join the local leisure centre and what the benefits are for them. So that customer knowledge cycle is about analysing, visualising, modelling that group, targeting with a campaign, measure the response to that campaign, and then start the whole process again. So these are our citizen segments. It's about 12 or so of them. So these are how we segment really families. It's not individuals, it's families, I think, which is really the segmentation. So if you look at one of those in a bit more detail, so it's Group F. So these are diverse large families, mainly from a South Asian origin, generally living in privately rented inner city terraces. So quite large families, some overcrowding, generally low qualifications, etc., etc. Interesting though, if you compare them with the white population, they are very high users of the internet. So they are very receptive to internet as a channel of access to the council, because internet is their means of engaging with heritage, culture from their countries of origin, and for keeping in touch with extended families who are still in particularly Bangladesh. But they don't watch TV, because TV is seen as a white population medium generally in the UK. There's not enough there for them. Group A, which was the sort of middle class, and this is looking at how we then take that segment and look at service need. So what do they want from the library service, cultural services, etc., etc. How do they want to engage with us? Online, phone, face to face. So putting them in order of priority. These are generally people who are time poor but cash rich. So these are people who actually don't demand a lot of us, apart from the fact that bins are collected, the street lights are on, and that the roads are mended when they want them to be, but are very vocal when those things don't happen. So actually very keen to use online. Because it can do it whenever they want, but actually also phone is a preferred mechanism for certain areas rather than email. And face-to-face is always towards the bottom because they haven't got the time to come into to an office. We do exactly the same for our businesses, so this isn't just about individuals and families. We do segment our businesses by size, structure and sort of broad sectoral classifications. So we target services that we provide to those businesses around that particular segmentation. So this is a sort of it's a good geeky picture. So I hope I put this one in for the geeks among you. This is a sort of drawing information for the back office systems using both information we've procured through Experian, a customer segmentation company, and information we get from our single customer record, and putting it into that customer insight environment where we can actually then do that targeting of customers. So looking at how we pull all that together and communicate actively with our customer base. So that's, if you like, us learning about the customer. There's the other side of that, the customer learning about the council. And to do that, we've created a new approach to engaging with our customers. This was the home page when we launched in about 2009. It's really about making it engaging for the customers, and was actually co-designed with a group of customers. So we brought people in to help us pull this home page together. Lots of online forms with those who've registered customers, then it's pre-populated with data. So if we know who you are, you don't have to put your name and address in. It comes up already on the form. So that's we can register and log into a secure account, and once you're in there you get your own personal homepage which shows all your dealings with the council, so you can see everything joined together. And one of the things we've tried to do is to make transparency of process, not just transparency of data. So we've tried wherever possible, and sometimes it hasn't been possible, but to link into the back office system so that when you raise a query with us, say you report a street light fault out, you can go onto your home page, you can see when we intend to fix that street light, and you can see when we've said that we have fixed it. Okay, street light, you probably look outside your house and see whether we fixed it or not, so probably not a good example. But you can, I think that transparency of process is something the public sector is not very good at. So what we've tried to do in effect is not build a customer access model, we've tried to build a customer fulfillment model, so that we're looking that people can follow through their service requests themselves. And it's very similar to what you do get it from Amazon. So it's how you build trust in the process. You know, when you order something from Amazon, it tells you when it's likely to be shipped, and it tells you when it's left. Then you know it's on its way. So that sort of process we tried to build in what we did at Birmingham. So went live in March 2010. We now got 24,000 customers signed up for an online personal account. I'm very disappointed with that number, in all honesty. 24,000 out of a population of 1 million, okay, probably what, 600,000 adults. So it's not a huge proportion of the population who are currently engaged through this. But at the moment there is no mandation, in fact no real benefit built into this process. There are councils now in the UK, under the pressure of the spending cuts, who are mandating online access for services. So the only way you can get4 is to do it online. So this is a customer homepage, secure. There are actually 4 levels of authentication developed with the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK. So we do very secure transactions on here. So things like foster care payments for children in care, you'll have your home page to actually put into the system your request for payment for foster care. And we've just refreshed the home page, so if you go to the website now, this is what it looks like, again developed in the light of feedback from the customers. Again, Another example, driving up performance, looking at, this is the internal Excellence in People Management programme, how we actually drive a standardised approach to performance management across those 40-odd thousand non-teaching staff. So a single approach to everybody using the same system. Very much focused around self-service, so we reduced the back office headcount in HR again by 25%. So the transactional staff have basically been taken out of the service. Consistent performance appraisal, and all held online. So we can put in, you can assess the performance not only of individuals but of teams, sections, departments. And that brings in, as your incremental progression depends on that appraisal, it does allow you to begin to build quite subtle things into this. So we could analyse on a statistical basis, not that I understood the statistics when it was fed back to me, I have to confess, whether or not there was a bias against women built into the appraisal process. Because, and it turned out there was. So we gave all the women employees of the council a few percentage point increase in their scoring, because we could recognise that there was a bias against women from people doing the appraisals. So it's at that sort of level that you can actually do the analysis. And the last example is how we're exploiting geographic information. Now we've got a single system. So what we wanted to do is internally make maps a key resource for everybody to use. So sharing reliable information rather than about citizens, make it easy to use and use pictures. Already touched upon that earlier. So a common corporate platform, single set of maps, and corporate quality governance of all that information. So we're looking at both internal and external promotion, so looking at what citizens want and what we want internally, but it's not just about council information, so things like the local travel information is on there, health facilities are also on there. We needed to move from that self-service model to looking at what else can we share. So what is happening nearby, education achievements, you know, where is the best place to live in Birmingham to get high levels of good education. Lots of interesting challenge about that. So what's happening in my area? Where's the local crime? What's the level of unemployment? Antisocial behaviour orders. How many children have been given ASBOs in my area? You can see why that becomes quite interestingly sensitive, because it can actually have an impact on things like house prices once you start sharing that data. You know, if an area looks a little bit down market, what's that going to do to the value of the property in that area? But on the other side, potential for people wanting to take ownership of those issues in that area, ability to focus around and increasing that feeling of partnership with the council. So again, an example from social care, looking at one of those self-funders. If they're going to be able to self-fund properly, they need the information in order to see what's available. And GIS is an aspect of doing that. So this is what it will look like for a user. This is the internal version within the council, so it's not the web-based version. So find a property, zoom into that property, and then get the basic maps, but then layers above that, of course. You want to see from your drop-down list, so click on those areas, press the information button, and it'll bring up what is available, and you can then sort of segment those areas. So there's 2 highways, improvement buffer areas around that particular spot, and also a woodland, bit of woodland. So that was our transformation programme. A huge aspect of information. I could probably talk all afternoon about it, so I better move on. But I think several aspects of that, which I think we got more or less right. I do tend to be a sort of a glass half empty sort of person, so I'll never really say it was absolutely wonderful, but we got more or less right. First of all, we were focused on delivering the change outcomes. Our approach is to define outcomes, build the service to deliver those outcomes, and then track the realisation of those outcomes. So very strong focus not on the existing service, it was a transformation approach. Let's start from a blank sheet of paper. If you were building this service in the 21st century, what would it look like? And rather than thinking, let's take all the baggage we've got so far. Don't know, the IT people amongst you will be very familiar with this. I've spent most of my career tacking technology onto existing processes, and I'm being frustrated by the lack of benefits that we're missing by doing that. Recognising that information is a key organisational resource, and you've got to manage it. Just as you would as you do money, people, property, etc. If you're going to get the sort of realised organisational objectives. And though I say the technology is really important, you've got to do it systemically. You've got to start from, you've got to deal with redesigning your processes, redesigning your job descriptions, redesigning your organisational structures, etc., etc. if you're going to get the full benefits. And change is something you need to resource. Really difficult one for my politicians, I have to say, who I must have had many conversations about, we pay these managers an awful lot of money, why can't they go on and transform their service? And there are actually two answers to that. One, they were brought in to run a service, and therefore actually they're very good operational managers. That doesn't necessarily mean they're very good transformational managers, it's a different skill set. But also, running that service is really hard work, and they're spending all their time running that service. So having the capacity to do it, it isn't there. So you can't do it as a sideline to business as usual. And last lesson is, it takes a long time. It takes longer than you think, so you've got to be persistent and see it through and keep hanging on in there. But we did things that I think with the benefit of hindsight we could have done a lot better. We did have a parallel organisational development initiative, which was actually created for political reasons. We had, as I said earlier, we had a Conservative Lib Dem coalition in Birmingham, and we have different perspectives amongst those politicians. So we had an HR cabinet member who wanted to run a change programme, and we had the deputy leader who was responsible for the business transformation programme I was running. And of course, they started effectively parallel initiatives, and we never really successfully joined them up. So I think you do need both to be happening. I think the problem was, from the workforce's point of view, identifying what the hell was going on. We seem to have two different things here, which are all supposed to be about change. So actually getting the communication out to the workforce was really difficult. We put a lot of effort initially into communication, not sufficient into engagement. So we made the classic mistake of sending out lots and lots of information and expecting people to be enthused about it. Most of them were confused by it, and there was no return channel. So it didn't take long for the rumours to start flying around the organisation about what this really was about. They wrote those rumours wrong, but actually there was no way to counter them. So actually trying to overcome that, we put a lot of effort in once we realised that to try and address it, but we were always starting from a low base. That became part of the way the council operated. And I think that was predominantly about the advent of the cuts in the last few years, as we've actually had to focus. Under the pressure of the cuts, departments have got more silo-based. They're protecting what's theirs, and that makes transformation even more difficult. So that's the sort of story, but I now think we should have been even more radical. I think we could have done a lot more. So I've got a couple of visions of the future here. Well, they're visions of the future from quite a while ago, as you'll see.
I'll see you tonight then.
Yes, all right. No, I said I'd come, didn't I?
Wish I could see you now.
Well, you can't, can you? You just have to wait.
But supposing the telephone could provide vision as well as sound, then he could see her now. Wouldn't that be better?
Yes, marvellous.
But whether we should always want vision or not, what kind of facilities can we expect in the next generation?
Worldwide communication, of course.
Hello, Bill. This is Henry.
Who did you say?
Henry. I'm calling from London.
Gee, that's a pleasant surprise, isn't it? How are things in your part of the world?
Well, it's a dark, wet morning here. I suppose you've been basking in the sun all day.
And, when we want it, Viewphone, in colour, using digital transmission by pulse code modulation right into the customer's premises.
Well, let's have a look at you, Bill.
Right, Henry, thanks for coming up. Gee, it's good to see you, Henry. You're certainly looking fit.
How's Betty, Bill?
She's right here now. Come over here, Betty, and say hello to Henry.
Hello, Henry. Long time no see.
Documents like this are transmitted in accurate detail by a slow scan, high definition process.
I'd like to see a copy of that.
Yes, I think you should.
Pressing this button suffuses the screen with ultraviolet light and imprints the copy on the photosensitive paper. Given all these facilities, the businessman will scarcely need to go to his office at all. He can do all his work in the comfort of his own home.
Apologies to the business women amongst you. That was about late 60s, but this is the next one I know the date of. It was 1980.
Imagine, if you will, sitting down to your morning coffee, turning on your home computer to read the day's newspaper. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it may seem. In fact, both local San Francisco papers are investing a lot of money to try and get a service just like that started. Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand new system.
17 stories up in his fashionable North Beach apartment, Richard Howard is calling a local number that will connect him with a computer in Columbus, Ohio. Meanwhile, across town, in this less than fashionable cubbyhole at the San Francisco Examiner, these editors are programming today's copy of the paper into that same Ohio computer. When the telephone connection between these two terminals is made, the newest form of electronic journalism lights up Mr. Howard's television with just about everything the Examiner prints in its regular edition. That is, with the exception of pictures, ads, and the comics. 8 newspapers around the country are currently in the computer network, and within the next few weeks, 3 others will join in.
This is an experiment. We're trying to figure out what it's going to mean to us as editors and reporters and what it means to the home user. And we're not in it to make money. We're probably not going to lose a lot, but we aren't going to make much either.
Both Examiner and Chronicle began service within the last 2 weeks and printed full-page ads about it. Of the estimated 2,000 to 3,000 home computer owners in the Bay Area, the Chronicle reports over 500 have responded by sending back coupons. Even though the electronic newspaper isn't as spiffy looking as the ads imply, people using the system are excited about its potential.
With this system, we have the option not only of seeing the newspaper on the screen, but also optionally we can copy it. So anything we're interested in, we could go back in again and copy it onto paper and save it, which I think is the future of the type of interrogation an individual will give to the newspapers.
This is only the first step in newspapers by computer. Engineers now predict the day will come when we get all our newspapers and magazines by home computer, but that's a few years off. So for the moment at least, this fellow isn't worried about being out of a job. Steve Newman, News Center 4.
Well, it takes over 2 hours to receive the entire text of the newspaper over the phone, and with an hourly use charge of $5, the new telepaper won't be much competition for the 20-cent street edition.
2,000 to 3,000 home computer users in the Bay Area, population 7 million. I think a couple of things come out of that. One is technology at the time is either always overhyped or gently mocked. That seems to be the two approaches to technology. But its long-term impact is always underestimated. So, looking at the context from a sort of IT perspective that we're working now, certainly in the UK it's all about austerity. I've touched upon that. Budget cuts, delayering, particularly of management, has pushed the IT function down the organisation quite often, so less able to influence the corporate management team. and a really, because of the austerity measures, strong focus on cost, less focus on value of technology. Sitting alongside that, we've got the policy framework. We have a national IT strategy, you've got an emerging one. We have the big society idea of sort of communities working together. And we've got my own soccer team has its own policy about local public service reform. But sitting against that, we've got the zeitgeist, the public view. Public still want really good public service, but the public's view of popular, how it's popularly reported, the public's view of the public servant isn't particularly high. We are the faceless bureaucrats, we are the fat cats, the idlers and the people taking backhanders. So that is a real challenge within the public service in the UK. We've also got, and it was touched upon this morning, this sort of idea of moving more towards commissioning organisations, where much more of our services are provided by buying them in than delivering them directly. And a report last year said we're on a way to sort of being one of 4 types of councils, and I'll come back to that later. One aspect of the context we never seem to take into account, though, is the technology. Moore's law, again, was mentioned earlier. Gordon Moore, founder of Intel, came up with this in the 1970s. It actually says that the density of transistors on a chip will double every 2 years. If you want the formal definition, but actually in practice, that means that computer power doubles every 2 years. So, 1980, when that second video was made, was the year I started my career. So you can work out your own personal Moore index. So for the mathematicians amongst you, take the number of years you've worked in your career, divide that by 2, and then raise 2 to the power of that number. So this is my own personal Moore index, which is how much more powerful the IT I'm now working on was than when I started my career. So it's 41,000 times 284 times more powerful than so I now carry my smartphone more storage than the council I started working with, which served a population of 5 million people in 1980. I don't think we ever really grapple with that pace of change of technology. Again, just to illustrate, median salary, average salary in the UK is £26,000 now. If it had risen at the same rate as technology has risen, it will be £240 million per year. So that's the speed of change. I think that comes with a number of implications. First of all, what does it mean for the idea of best practice? Best practice has been something the public sector has been pushed towards for a long time. You know, let's find what is best and emulate it. By the time that has been disseminated, it's at least 2 years since they started that process. By the time you implement it, you'll be 2 years later than that. So you're 2 generations behind the technology curve. So why are you following that? Yes, take it, but improve it. Secondly, I think it has an impact on leadership and management. I think probably under the pressure of new public management, we've had a really strong focus for the last couple of decades now around process compliance, which would be really good if we were making widgets. Actually, a lot of what we do in the public sector is not about making widgets. It's about delivering things like social care. It's about creating services which are built around an individual, rather than about building a vanilla approach all the time. So I can see you want me to let that one play out. Sorry, I've not got the whole film. We also have incredibly autocratic models of leadership, where the sort of great leader sits at the head of the organisation, and hierarchical management structures. And then this idea of front and back office. I mean, it's a mantra in the UK, protect the front line. What that tends to mean is protect the way the front line currently delivers services, rather than protect the way the front line outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And it seems to me that we've got to move away from that and actually start seeing things holistically. It may be much better to invest in the back office if you're going to deliver better frontline outcomes. So back to those council types, clustered are those which are grouped together to buy service collectively. Residual have outsourced everything, there's not much left of them. Commercial are ones who are delivering services to others on a sort of semi-privatised basis, and lifestyle are the ones who've sort of decided to promote a particular part of their region. I think I can only think of one in the UK, which is Brighton and Hove Council, which really pushes its gay and green credentials, and that is its sort of unique selling point. But I think there's an alternative. I think we can move towards this idea of the transforming council, which is looking at the potential of IT to be something that's continuously impacting on how we deliver services. I think it's got a number of characteristics. I think it is about being entrepreneurial, about trying to be different to the way we do things, and sitting alongside that innovative, flexible and agile, so we're delivering to individuals and to communities in ways that suit those individuals and communities, not in ways that suits the council. Transparency, or data transparency and process transparency, I've already touched upon that. Engaged both with its workforce and with its customers, so again bringing in all the stuff about social media we've heard already today. Constantly in flux, always time for change, and about managing risk rather than seeing risk as something that ought to be avoided. And of course being able to do that because it's digitally enabled. So I think it's all change. I think the first thing we've got to change is our model of change. Our model of change is still on the unfreeze, change, refreeze model, which was actually developed in the 1930s. Possibly should have moved on a little bit from that. But it effectively says you're moving from one period of stability through a process of change to a future period of stability. There is no stability. We have to move to a model which is about continuous cycles of change, looking at outcomes, redesign, implement, realise benefits, back again to outcomes. And over much shorter time frames we're used to. I would say maximum of 5 to 7 years for that cycle. And I think it means new models of leadership and management, where leadership becomes about a diffuse model of leadership rather than an autocratic style of leadership, and management becomes as much about change as it is about delivering operational services. And I'll just put a plug in for the thing we developed at Birmingham, CHAMPS 2, change management methodology, which helps deliver that, and is now in the public domain with a Creative Commons license. You can get full details at champs2.info. So, lots of blockers, I won't run through them all. Culture, capacity, capability. I think structure is an interesting one. We still tend to structure our local authorities around professional disciplines. So you have the double whammy of when you try and make change, you're impacting on the management structure and you're impacting on the professional structure. So you actually have a double resistance to change built into your structure. And one which I find really frustrating is so many chief executives look like the neighbouring authority's chief executive. So we tend to have a model that we keep promoting. There are far too few mavericks in the public sector. And of course the fame and fear. You know, you can whisper in a politician's ear how this isn't going to work. So conclusions. Well, I don't think just transformational change is possible. I think it's essential if we're going to keep pace with the way society is changing. It isn't easy, and there are some skills which are in short supply. I think change is underpinned by new approaches to information and knowledge management that we can bring to bear, but it must be systemic. And questions, comments, and hopefully a few challenges as well. Thank you.